Mm-hmm.
It says live, so check your
Awesome.
Facebook.
Thank you.
We can check it too. Yep, I
Yep,
see.
we are up.
Okay.
Hello, Facebook community. Make sure you take a moment to share this conversation.
Okay. Close this in case your girl makes an outburst. I mean, the mics will catch it, but we have to hear it though. Like, girl, for real. Shh.
Thank you. Hello and welcome to Living Strong, the flip side of adversity. I am Dr. Virdra Jackson, the CEO and creative of Living Strong Consulting. And we are excited to launch our first episode of Women's History Month. And I really wanted an opportunity to launch this conversation um, with the intention of recognizing that we all have an opportunity every single day to create history. Although we stand on the shoulders of women who have come before us, who have done mighty, mighty things and have set the table, in some cases throughout the table, brought their own table in, all of the things. But I also want us to think about how are we interacting with one another every single day to create a moment, whether it be grand on platforms historical or just significant in the life of someone else. And so in our conversation today, I have invited a Gen Zer to the table to have a conversation with this Gen Xer as we talk about, how have our generations in this moment in time, this moment in history, how has our culture impacted how we are approaching life? What gets in the way between our generations? What's impacting our perception of our worth? And talking honestly about the lens of our faith as we talk about womanhood and what actually depletes us, and ways for us to think about how we can refill. So for those of you who are like, well, Gen Z, Gen X, what is that? Well, what generation am I? You know what? I pulled it all up so that you can have a chance to figure out where you fall in this conversation. So, what is powerful? I did a training on understanding the generations. And what's powerful is we are living currently in an era that we have never actually had an opportunity to live in before. All five generations actually have access to the workforce at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm actually going to take us all the way back to the sixth generation and move us forward. So, silent generation is from 1928 to 1945. And when you hear your generation, if you are on Facebook, I want you to drop it into the chat. Say, that's me. Just put, that's me. Baby boomers from 1946 to 1964. I just made the cutoff. Generation X from 1965 to 1980. Millennials are from 1981 to 1996. Gen Zers are from 1997 to 2012, and Generation Alpha are 2013 to the mid 2020s. So wherever you fell, I want you, if you are on Facebook right now, to just drop a "that's me," put it into the comment section. And so that just told you we are about 35 years apart in age, sitting next to each other with actually what I think as women still pretty much wanting the same thing. But our lives in our generational experiences sometimes have us go after it in different ways.
Yes.
And also will have us at odds with one another, even though we want the same thing. So she has been on before, and I have posted about her because she is the best media intern, but she's mine, that you could ever have. So let me tell you a little bit more about my guest. My Gen Zer, Karina Bruno, is currently attending Lancaster Bible College, majoring in communication and biblical studies. She has always had a deep passion for the arts and the creative media space as she aspires to be an entrepreneurial writer and speaker. Karina was the district and regional winner of the Optimist 2020 Oracle Contest. She went on to pursue speaking opportunities, including giving a speech to her high school graduating class and presenting devotionals for the Association for Biblical Higher Education. She has written several articles for ministries, including Reclaim Today and the Park Forum. And presently, she is our social media intern right here with our Living Strong team. And she co-hosts her own podcast called The Introvert City, and she is actively pursuing visionary opportunities with the hope of sharing the message of God's desire to ignite creativity within. Welcome to this intergenerational conversation on the flip side of adversity, Karina.
I am so honored and grateful to be here. Thank you so much.
Yes.
I think this is going to be a really important and fulfilling conversation.
I'm excited too. I've been thinking really deeply about this from the time we kind of came up with this idea because I honestly believe that we really, what I said in the beginning, I feel like, especially as two women of faith, ultimately we want basically at ground level pretty much the same things. We might go after it differently, but to be at peace, to have joy, to make an impact, to have purpose.
Yep.
To do things that are significant for God, to show up in authentic spaces, to financially be stable enough to actually execute our call, like all of those things. All of those things. But I find that there are, and I have heard from others as I work in the trauma-informed spaces, that there's sometimes like this divide, like we don't get each other and we fall into a place of division rather than collaboration or even mentorship. What do you think about, like, what do you think is causing or perpetuating that division?
Yeah, that divide is very prevalent, especially in mentorship. I'm glad that you brought that up because I am someone who has always kind of looked for a mentor. I definitely had one when I was younger, and I'm in a place now in college where a lot of people are graduating and seeking that counsel that's like close to their age and has experienced what they experienced, and they're kind of just seeking wisdom. And for me, that's been really difficult, mainly because I feel of the stereotypes that are present between our generations. Like, people my age will look at people your age and go, oh, they don't know anything. They don't know what they're doing in technology and whatever. And vice versa. People might look at my generation and think, oh, they're they're so busy all the time, like they're grinding all the time. They don't make time for themselves, and they don't know what they're talking about, and they're just super emotional, and they act on their emotions and all that stuff. So because of those stereotypes that exist, I just feel like it's really really hard to communicate with no barriers and no boundaries and no preconceived notions of what, okay, I'm going to talk to this person who's a little older than me. What does it look like to have no preconceived notions of that?
Mhm. And I often connect that to how can I quiet the chatter in my head so I actually can hear you
Hmm.
and hear your heart, hear your needs, and actually acknowledge that I may have been making an assumption and it was wrong. And now I need to either apologize for that, come from a place of humility, but being willing to listen and quiet down the chatter. I think there
Yeah.
are social constructs that keep us at odds because that narrative within our culture of having people on opposite sides of something is so popular
Yeah.
that it the opportunity to really come together and have mentorship. What would mentorship look like for you?
Oh my gosh. I would like, ideally it would be for someone to just walk alongside me, someone I can be absolutely 100% transparent with without fear of judgment or anything. And the thing with that is that it's hard when you know someone so deeply and intimately. So I'd want a mentor to not be involved in every single aspect of my life, to be distant enough where they like won't be judging me or won't be taking what they know about me into their life with other people, but to still love me so deeply and care about me and desire for me to grow in ways that maybe they wish they had or ways that they did. So just that, I don't really see a lot of that because I think people are trying to be too close. There's nothing wrong with having like a deep friendship of different generations. There's nothing wrong with that. But with a mentor, I think there has to be a balance of friendship versus I want what's best for you, so I'll be honest with you.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of a mentor that
Hmm.
is not a friend because they're going to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But I also think as we really address the divide, the younger generation have to be willing to hear that actually you got that wrong.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I was going to bring that up. Something about my generation that I will say is that we were sort of coddled, I think. And we were never told, this is so stereotypical, but we were told like everybody's a winner. And we never, I feel, got told hard truths because the older generations wanted us to succeed. And I think that's really beautiful. But I also think there wasn't a lot of accountability. And
Mhm.
that's why you see a lot of people, my generation, getting on social media and feeling the autonomy to say whatever they want to say, even if it's going to hurt somebody else, because nobody really sat down with them and told them, like, I love that you're growing in this way, but maybe think about this.
Mhm.
So I totally agree with you that we need to be ready to hear some honest truths.
Now, I will own our generation have are coming to the table with our own stuff. But as I also connect with what you just said, I think it's also a truth in that when you understand your generation and how you begin to approach the world actually is impacted by the stuff that's happening in and around the time when you were born in your
Hmm.
youngest years. And so I think about when I hear or see a younger person, a younger generation struggle with hearing that you're wrong or that you got that wrong, it when you understand that the Gen Zers are considered the first of the digital world, you have had such quick, easy access to information
Yeah.
that the thought that you could have something wrong, it just goes against the fact that you could Google it or you could, whereas
Hmm.
in my generation, we didn't have the internet until we were already adults.
Yeah.
And so we had to figure out how to adjust to work life, but it was built into from birth
Yeah.
your access to so much information that, oh, what do you mean I'm wrong? I
Yeah.
found that on such and such. right
That
here.
is so true. Yes, I
Hmm.
agree.
Yeah. So when we think about mentorship, this conversation is around womanhood and how we are approaching womanhood, even though there's a 35-year divide. That journey takes us to the grave. And so I guess my first question is, the societal expectations
Hmm.
as well as the perception of womanhood. It has changed as time and culture has changed. And I think about as a Gen Xer, when I was growing up, being a woman was around your career, your family, pursuing or breaking the glass ceiling. Actually, it was very much a linear path of being able to go to college, get a career, get financially stable, get married. All of it was like this linear path, and it's not the same for you in your generation. How has it evolved differently through the lens that you're looking at and experiencing life?
Yeah. I have a thought, and I don't know if everyone in my generation would agree,
Mhm,
but I actually would say that the linear path still exists. It's
mhm.
just different.
Okay.
So we're under the impression, women in my generation, I think that we can have it all and do it all and
Mhm,
make whatever choices we want. And we don't have to go to college if we don't want to, and it doesn't matter. And I actually think that the exposure to social media, which social media is like the root of my generation's problems, so much I could say there, but we're exposed to all of these like girl bosses on social media who have built this life for themselves. And that, like, they did that all by themselves and they didn't need the help of anybody else. And if you just follow this step and this step and this step, you can build your own platform. You can
mhm,
own your own business. You can have it all, like I said, but it still feels very linear and step by step. Because what if a woman wants to take a break and stay at home and
mhm,
be with her kids for a while? I feel like that's not always accepted as also a good choice because
mhm,
she just has to be grinding and working all the time to get to the place of a successful woman, because a successful woman has gone from the ground up and built everything with her own hands by herself. And like I said, I have so much respect for those women and I desire to be that woman who has built like a life for herself. I'm trying to build a platform for myself too, but I'm also trying to remember that it's okay if I don't reach success by like age 25 by everything that I did by myself. It's okay to have breaks. It's okay to have things happen in my life that God planned and I didn't and I'm totally
mhm.
thrown off. So, yeah, I think that um exists and a lot of women my age don't acknowledge that.
It's interesting that you say that because as I was preparing for our conversation and I was really thinking about the positives and the negatives that could be contributing and impacting this bridge or divide between our generations. When I was doing my research, it was actually the Gen Xer generation that were the pioneers of that work life balance mentality.
Hmm.
It started with our generation, and that you actually can aspire, you can get you like you can go after and because we're both women of color, it that whole mindset of the strong black woman, kind of like you can it started with our generation,
Hmm.
and we gave that to yours, and it should have never been. We shouldn't have put the cape on in the first place.
Hmm. Hmm. Go
to
ahead.
be to be able to recognize you don't have to be strong all the time, you don't have to be grinding all the time, that actually work life balance is an illusion. No one has it.
That's true, yeah.
And but it started with us, and we gave it to your generation, and now it's
Mhm.
distorted because there is nowhere in your 20s. I'm getting ready to crush. Oh, y'all, hold, protect me, I'm
Please
getting ready to
go
crush
for
your
it.
soul. There's nowhere in your 20s that you should have figured it out.
Hmm.
You shouldn't. You actually should be making all of the mistakes you possibly can, exploring, experimenting,
Hmm.
and somehow in that transfer. Your generation has picked up this "I should be doing by now" conversation,
Yeah. Mhm.
when actually in your 20s, developmentally, your brain isn't even fully developed yet.
Yep.
And so we gave that to you, and I'm like, oh, can we take it back? Can we take it back? Because it was a mistake for us to even do it
Hmm.
to ourselves. And we're still trying to recover
Mhm.
and constantly talking about, let me take the cape off.
Yeah.
What do you think is something that, when you are thinking about your generation, that positively you feel like, as you could, now that I've debunked this whole grinding concept, but what's something you feel like you have actually positively gained from our connection, what we may have passed on to you?
Yeah. I know I talked earlier about us being sort of coddled and told that everything we do is good and okay. And that's kind of on the extreme end. But in that, I am actually so incredibly grateful for the freedom to be emotional and to experience failure. And I feel like all of the Gen X people in my life and my parents and my mom in particular like gave me the space to mess up sometimes and to
Mhm.
just to sit in my emotions and not be like, okay, well, you have to get yourself back together tomorrow. And like, small example, I would get mental health days in high school. Like, my
Mhm.
parents were never like, if I truly needed it, and I never took
Mhm.
advantage of it. Like, if I truly needed it, they would let me stay home if I needed to kind
Mm.
of rewire myself and was feeling very anxious. And also with anxiety, I feel like mental health issues have been normalized. I feel like you guys have really done the work in that area and allowed the space for us to recognize mental health and where we need to work on it. What things we actually struggle with because we don't get it right all the time. Like a lot of people in my generation think that they have a really bad anxiety disorder when in reality it might have been circumstantial or caused by something.
Mm.
But regardless, I feel like people in your generation and my parents never they're never like you're wrong. They sort of
Mm.
let me figure that out.
Mm.
Gave me the space to do that.
Mhm.
And I'm just very grateful for that.
You know what? That's actually just good parenting. I'm just gonna be I'm just gonna be
Oh no,
honest,
I mean, I
because
feel like I've seen that among your generation though.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think I so again, the whole conversation, especially in, and I want us to actually talk about our faith, especially in the church, like that whole conversation around mental health, faith, and all of that was very divided
Mhm.
when I was a child. And I remember that we never talked about mental health when I was in college, when I was growing up. As I've gotten now in this age, now looking at your generation and really understanding that things are different. And as I parent my own Gen Zer, it's why I say it's good parenting is because we have to be willing, especially as parents, to shift from the person rearing you to mentoring you.
Mhm.
Mentoring you not quite in the same way you discussed it earlier, but actually recognizing I've got to allow you to struggle with things, to recognize you're not well, without judgment,
Mhm.
and allow it to happen, and not push you into a grind mentality that I may have grown up with, because that did not serve me well now in my 50s. I can remember it wasn't until my 40s that I actually began to push back on, you know what? I don't want to grind like that. I don't. And who am I outside of my career, my
Mhm.
credentials, like all of those things made up who I was, because that was the path our
Yeah.
generation took. But I feel like it's good parenting to be able to have gone through that evolution and recognize that's not the same thing I'm going to offer the Gen Zer who is now the one I want to mentor into her next adult stages.
Mhm. That's really beautiful and I think that's so important. Um, yeah, I had a thought, but it's gone. You can continue.
So, so you actually asked for us to talk about any personal experiences or anecdotes that actually highlight
hmm
significant differences in how our generations approached aspiration and work-life balance.
hmm
So, you want me to go first, or you want to go first?
I can go first. There's a couple of examples that come to mind for me. The first one being this is not a real person interaction I had, but I was listening to a podcast of a man talk about how he reached his peak in his 20s. He reached ultimate success, right? He had several books come out and a very successful podcast platform and social media platform. And this man is like 40 or 50 now. And he talked about how like depressed he was after
Mhm.
that. And he didn't know what to do with his life once that had happened because he was like, I already dedicated so much time into this platform and now it's super successful and has blown up and I don't know what to do with myself now. And I was
Mm.
listening to that and I was like, what if that happened to me? I don't know. My in my head, it's going to take me decades to get to the place where I want to be. But what if unexpectedly that were to happen to me in my 20s and I had just not wasted, but all of the energy that I had put into my desires, like it paid off and
Wow.
now what,
Mhm.
I didn't want to be asking like the who am I question in my 20s
Mhm.
because that's happening with my generation and people are posting about it. They'll take a video of themselves. This is like a trending thing right now of people recording themselves and being like, I'm 25, 26 and I don't know who I am and I don't know what I want to do. And I'm like, first of all, please stop recording yourself and posting that. But second of all, it makes sense why this is happening. And so I just listening to that man talk about his experience caused me to reflect on my life so much because in my own life, I feel like I've accomplished nothing sometimes. And then
Mm.
I like I was listening to you even read my bio and I was like, it's pretty cool that I wrote those articles, Like those were successes for me. They weren't nothing. I put work into them. So that was just a smaller example of like ways that I noticed that like I was very conscious of the generational divide and I was like, if I continue with this mindset, I'm not gonna be where I wanna be.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
yeah.
Well, there is so much, and I wanna unpack what you just said and not even give my anecdote because I think about when you said that, again, thinking about your generation as the digital world generation, you have so much very quick access and the way technology has accelerated what people would call success financially,
Mhm.
that when I hear something like that at a 25, you made a whole bunch of money and therefore you are identifying yourself as successful and then getting on social media and influencing
Mhm.
a whole generation that that is what success is. That's where, for me, that's where the issue is. Because is that actually success,
Mm.
right? Is success only that one thing? And if your generation is viewing success through that lens of platform, performances, and money, then when I, as a mentor, am coming to you and and I want so urgently to help you recognize with compassion, not judgment, that in your 20s, you should not know who you are.
Hmm.
And so you see how it's out of sync. It's like
Yeah.
just because you made a bunch of money does not mean you gained identity.
Yep.
All you did was increase your bank account.
Yeah. That's good.
But because social media has aligned those two things together, it has caused confusion where from my gen and operate an opportunity when we talk about again women of faith, that Titus 2 conversation, for me to course correct the conversation with someone in your generation if you are willing for us to have kind of that course correct. Like that is a version of success, but that cannot be identity, because I learned from my generation that climbing the corporate ladder or gaining that degree, I thought that was the pinnacle of success. And therefore, when I put all of the ducks in a row because of the climb, because of the degree, and everything shifted, I did not understand, well, that wasn't supposed to happen. Who am I now? So if I had that happen at 40 and watch the acceleration, your generation is having that same conversation at 25.
Yep.
And your brain isn't fully developed yet. And if we could get honest as a generation and say, I've been there, but can I help you get free from an unrealistic expectation?
Ooh, are you asking?
Yes.
You know, not without doing the work, I think. Expectations among my generation are like, we think we know everything. And I say that as a Gen Zer. I'm not even trying to say I'm not in that camp, because I totally am. I totally think that I know exactly what my life's going to look like 15, 20 years ahead. And breaking down those expectations, I think, requires so much work, requires going out and seeking mentorship, or even just being honest about your struggles and the things that you want in life. I think a lot of my generation isn't honest, and whether that's to themselves or to others, about what they want to accomplish, or even in the ways that they struggle with their identity. And so, yeah, I think breaking down those unrealistic expectations is possible, but will require years of work, and will require honesty from our generation and from older generations as well.
As I listen to you, I'm like, we literally live parallel lives, but because of stereotypes that our culture has placed between us, we aren't reaching each other. Because as I listen to you, it's recognizing that we both, because of the accelerated place you have, everything you have access to, it has you believe that you're right. And sometimes putting up a facade, which is a social media, it's all about the filter for you. Our filter is as those older in older generations, you kept that stuff to yourself. You kept it behind closed doors. You put the face on. Before there was a filter in your generation, there was a mask in mine. And so we literally are in parallel process. But what I heard you say is, like, if we could actually, you put down the filter and I put down the mask and get into relationship and allow us to both be wrong. Like, neither one of us have it 100% right. And if we could get to a place of actually being in relationship to be vulnerable, and me saying, you know what, there are days that I'm like, I am failing at this thing. I don't have any idea of what I'm doing. At getting ready to be 55. Today I have no idea of what I'm doing. But do I allow that mask to be down in front of your generation because I'm afraid of what you'll think, do with it, or say about it?
Yeah. That is so good. And I feel like I'm saying a lot of bad things about my generation. I promise I do love my people, and there are good things, I promise. But another thing is that I just feel like the idea of putting, like, taking off the filter and being authentic feels so far from my generation, because it's our normal. Like, it's very sad, and we don't know who we are, and it's why you see a big thing in my generation is like trying to categorize yourself as something,
Mhm.
a big thing is like an aesthetic, right? With the way that you appear, with your clothing. There's a lot of labels for those in my generation. And even in talking with my friends, I'll be like, oh, what aesthetic am I today with my outfit? You know what I mean? And I noticed that has become such like the norm, literally because we don't know who we would be without those labels.
I love this concept of saying, what aesthetic am I today?
No.
I'm like, what does
Yeah.
that mean?
Okay, example. The other day I like don't care what I wear to school and I show up in
Mhm.
sweatpants. And the other day I wore like jeans and big earrings and like a big baggy, like it was very grunge type looking and my friends were like, "Oh my gosh, you're so like art teacher aesthetic," you know, like these little labels. And I was like, "Okay, I'll take it." But and then each day like also with like things like building a Pinterest board for yourself or having a vision board, like that's a big thing of labeling yourself as something and you cannot go outside of that realm. Which
You're
is
not allowed
yeah, like
as a generation. Holy
which is
cow.
also why I noticed with social media presence, people of my generation don't post things that happen to them. They only post pictures of themselves or pictures that will fit a particular look and aesthetic. Like it's not the norm for my generation to post a picture after like a family trip and to be like,
Mhm.
"Hey, I just got back from a family trip. These are all the pictures." I never see that. And I think it's sad.
Oh.
I think it's sad that that's another way that we're being dishonest with each other is like, yeah, sometimes we take vacations with our families to a campground for a weekend, but you never will hear about that because it's
Mm.
only about accomplishments or the way that something looks or a very put together, planned out post. It's never spontaneous. And I think
Mm.
spontaneity is so important.
It's interesting because I think about, although our generation does do the whole, if you're being honest, they'll do the family photos, but only the ones that turned out well.
Right?
So that continued struggle, but I'm curious as well, going back to some of the elements of what you shared, as women of faith and walking in womanhood of identity, how do you break yourself apart from culture norms
Hmm.
to be who you are in your, when will you be 20?
August.
In your soon to be 20s. How does your faith impact how you show up in your generation?
Yeah. The first thing I try to remember is the omnipresence of God. And I talked a little bit about this. I remember the last time I was here with the other
Mhm.
guests about God being in every single moment. Obviously, my generation is stereotyped as being glued to our phones, and we don't really know how to be present. And if we're bored, that's what we turn to. But I think be like embracing boredom and recognizing God existing in every single moment, and we have the freedom to pray in every single moment, whether we're walking down the street or even with other people or alone in the car. Um, and I
Mhm.
think that God actually calls us to do that. And
Mhm.
if we don't do that, we sort of lose sight of our surroundings and the people around us, and it becomes very me focused. It's very easy for that to happen in any generation. But
Mhm.
um, so I first of all try to remember that God is in every single moment with me. And something I've been trying to just learn more about and be aware of is like and finding out for myself what it means to be a woman of God and I hear the phrase a lot like basking in your femininity and what that means.
Wow.
Um, and I want to be a feminine and soft and successful woman. And I think a lot of people don't put those together. Like you're either soft and you're timid and you're shy, or you're successful and super bold and extroverted. And I think that the two can coexist. With lots of prayer and discipline and practice. And that's what I would like to accomplish. I'm definitely not there yet, but it's something that I aspire to be.
And it's okay because you're getting ready to be 20.
Yeah, I know.
You're 20. There feels like there's so much pressure
Yes.
that the younger generation places on themselves. And when I think about getting caught up in the filters of social constructs and really pursuing the opportunity to be a woman of God in your generation in this season and time, I actually feel like we need to remember that God doesn't care about He was here before generation
Yeah.
started, and he's the same then as he is now. And it's remembering that it's not about culture, it's about the identity he has given us,
Mhm.
and that you are fearfully and wonderfully made as a woman,
Yeah.
and that it is an and. Because in the same way that he gave us both respect and value, we just have different roles.
Yep.
There's countless stories in the New Testament of women who were clearly leaders, who were evangelists, who
Yeah.
spread the gospel, who he trusted. And so when I think about, it doesn't have to be or, you can be a bold woman and be fully woman.
Mhm.
And you don't have to be it, you don't have to shy away from wanting to, what did you say, this aesthetic over here versus this aesthetic.
Yeah.
When we are so worried about aesthetics and not identity, we get
Mm.
distracted
Yeah.
and derailed in some respects. And
Mhm.
so it's really going back across all generations and going back to the original truth of our identity in and our reflection of Imago Dei.
Mhm.
We are in his image, and therefore, just by that fact, we are valuable. And I think when we get so caught up in your generation, my generation, this culture, that we lose sight and get distracted and lose sight of that foundational truth.
Mhm.
As women, we are valuable. We can be powerful as well. And we have been called here for service, for purpose, for passion, that he will use our voices. It's not an or, it's all of that, because we serve a creative, complex God
Yep.
that does things beyond our ability to even understand or comprehend what's possible.
That is so encouraging, and I think more women need to hear that
Mhm.
of every generation, truly. I think not that it would solve problems immediately, but it would help us to slow down if we recognize that we don't need to be so desperate for identity searching all the time because we already have that in Christ.
Mhm.
I just the way you worded it was so beautiful.
That grind and fear of not of being at a particular stage at a particular season, I think about how our generation could help you calm down without being condescending.
Hmm.
I want that for us. I want us to be able to have roundtable conversations to with wisdom and love. I think it's about motivation.
Hmm.
Like what's behind your motivation in the conversation that I'm thinking your generation would pick up on, and whether or not that would be the thing that would make you more receptive.
Hmm. So you're asking what you guys could
Yeah,
do.
yeah. Well, actually, maybe what are we getting wrong
Hmm.
that keeps us from actually having the right kind of conversation around calm down. It's okay. What are we
Yeah.
getting wrong?
I don't know what part, like if I can name a single particular thing, but I will say that I think a really great first step is conversations like this.
Mhm.
And like I mentioned in the beginning, just going into friendships of different generations and seeking wisdom from different generations with no preconceived notions and genuinely just asking, how can I help you on a generational level and on an individual level
Mhm.
too? Because it starts on like a more micro scale. And I think once everybody has those more intimate relationships, and it will become a more macro scale and will become more generational. But I'm actually more curious too on what my generation can do in terms of like, do you feel a particular way? Like, do you feel like there's a competition maybe with the grind culture of our generations, or like what we can do better to create a more peaceful environment too?
Yeah. I don't know if we are competing or if we are just finding a new way of doing what we started. So remember, when you think about what our generation actually were the pioneers of, it was that climb the ladder, break the ceiling, create financial stability, you know, that work life balance. We were the pioneers of that. I think unless we get really clear on what wasn't working
Hmm.
for us, like what the things that we adopted that didn't work, then being able to recognize we're just doing the same thing you're doing. We're now just adapting your approach to meet where we are at the age we were in.
Hmm.
So, and even the generation between us. So recognizing that there is a full generation between ours. And so the millennials are between us.
Yeah.
And their concept of I should be at this stage by such and such. No, like even by 40, I did not connect or begin to really unpack purpose and that it wasn't about work
Mm.
and other people until my 40s. And I wish that someone older had told me, calm down. You're not supposed to know. Just take in everything you can.
Hmm.
I didn't do that. And so when I see a woman in her 40s who is stressed out, I should have by now. I'm like, no, you're just getting started.
Hmm.
If you calm down, your 40s is going to it's just going to be an enlightenment period. But it actually isn't until your 50s that you start to not really care what other people
Oh my gosh.
it wasn't until my 50s that I truly knew my worth
Hmm.
professionally and began to define what I was and wasn't going to do.
Hmm.
And I've only heard that it gets better at 60.
So you're telling me
I'm sorry.
for 30 more years, I'm not going to have boundaries in that area.
But you know what? But what if we release this expectation and actually not worry so much that for next 30 years I'm going to have, well, no, why don't we raise our personal individual awareness
Hmm.
and hold ourselves accountable as well as one another in that, remember, you're okay.
Yeah.
What if we spent more time just talking to each other and saying, you're okay?
So much would change. Seriously, I don't think people realize the impact of those tiny, intimate conversations that you might think, oh, I'm just going to say this word of encouragement to somebody younger than me, but they probably won't think about it. They do. Like, there were people who spoke into my life when I was 12 that I still vividly remember their words, that still encourages me to this day, that I thank God. I'm like, wow, God really allowed this person to speak to me and allowed the memory to stick. And I can now encourage somebody else. Like, I just think people need to get past that fear in their head that's like, I don't want to be overstepping boundaries, or like I don't want to be looked at as stupid because I'm going off and giving little messages. But I just think if people paid more attention to those smaller conversations, so much would change. I really believe that.
So it's not actually having or spouting something from a distance, from a platform, from a podium. It's
No.
actually taking the time to get more intimate
Yes.
and smaller, even though your generation desires the followings, the likes, and the big
Yeah.
change, you feel like change would actually happen if we got smaller and more intimate with one another.
100%. I totally think that. And everybody wants those platforms, and everybody wants to be the influencer that makes 60-second videos about what I changed and what this experience was like for me. And influencer, I guess they're called, there's a specific word for influencers who are specifically about like positivity
Mhm.
and mental health. And I adore people who have built that platform. I have so much respect, and I hope to be there one day. But just thinking that a 60-second video would have more impact than a 20-minute real person conversation with eye contact and physical touch, like, is crazy to me.
Mm.
Obviously, the in-person conversation to me would have more of an impact, and I think
Mhm.
it needs to happen.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think the opportunity for my generation to get brave and vulnerable. Uh, you said your generation struggles with honesty when I feel like our generation has struggled with being honest with you.
Hmm.
Like actually telling you the things that we have dropped and fumbled, the mistakes that we have made, the sins that we have committed, the stuff that we have done, us getting actually honest about it so that you can relax on the perception of everything has to be perfect, right, and rising,
Hmm.
when actually it was not that way in our lives, but we portrayed it, and therefore in a desire to be perceived one way, we actually were dishonest with your generation.
Hmm.
And to think about actually the original question that I didn't answer, I kind of, because you gave such like good I was like, we gotta talk about that.
Yeah.
When you asked to share a personal experience or
Yeah.
anecdote that highlights significant differences in how our generations approach career. So to an anecdote on both ends, I actually have gotten intentional about telling my 20-something-year-old, my Gen Zer, who is my youngest daughter, I've actually gotten intentional about telling her about things that have gone wrong in my business,
Hmm.
when I am struggling, when I'm lacking confidence. And I've gotten intentional with that because I began to see in her perception that she's got to be at the top of her game all the time. And I paused and I said, whoa, wait, that's because I've never told her
Hmm.
about my failures.
Yeah.
And so I've now got to pause, i.e., it might be late, but I have been intentional, and because she's now living out on her own.
Yeah.
And so she has this perception of everything being a certain way. And so I've gotten to a place where, I need to tell her when stuff is not right with me.
Mm.
Not to dump on her, but for her to actually see me
Yeah.
so that she can relax and recognize, oh, she doesn't have it all together. But she's a pretty good human being.
Yeah.
Right?
Hmm.
The other thing, I think, an anecdote from my childhood, which is really interesting. You say 12 for you. Someone said something, I think developmentally,
Yeah.
that's important. So people in generations now looking at our generation alpha,
Yeah.
who are behind you, you now need to look back. You're now, ooh, look, there's a generation behind you now. You're not the youngest anymore. So the Gen Alpha, 12 years old,
Hmm.
is a pivotal time in identity building.
Yeah.
And so when we actually take time in that window with our young people, I remember at 12, to this day, I remember where we were standing in our house. I was feeling myself. I was feeling myself. I
Yeah.
knew I was cute.
Yeah.
And you couldn't tell me anything. And she pulled me to the side, got right in my face and said, your beauty will get you in the room, but it will only be your intellect that gets you a place to stay.
That's so good.
And she had this whole conversation with me around that people would be drawn to my beauty, but recognize you must be a woman of intellect, or else you will not be able to command the spaces you are in, because beauty will fade. I remember that 12-year-old conversation to this day. Now, have I gotten lost sometimes along the way? It comes back to me. And so it's interesting that when we are pursuing womanhood, to release the perception of it's about what I look like. No, it's more about who are you?
Yeah.
Corina, I actually have to admit that this has probably been the fastest conversation. We have 1 minute left.
Oh my gosh.
1 minute left.
I was trying to look at the time on your phone, and
I
I thought it said
cannot believe-
5:35,
No,
and I'm like, oh, we're good.
5:56.
Wow. Okay.
So I want you to tell people one thing that you are excited about your future, what's on the horizon for you, and how
thank
people can
you.
follow you.
So you can follow me on Instagram at Corina_B04. Like I said, I'm trying to build a writing platform for myself and a speaking platform. And I co-host a podcast with my boyfriend, The Introvert City, that's currently expanding and growing. And it's a lot of fun. And we just started doing YouTube videos as well. So if you could go subscribe to that and check us out on Spotify as well. It's a super fun thing that we do, and just a passion of mine that I hope to see develop. In the future, I'm just really excited about graduation. I know I'm not supposed to look that far in the future, but I am excited, and just what early 20s will look like. So I appreciate being here. This was so amazing.
You are absolutely amazing, and I love everything about you. And I just think you have wisdom that your generation will learn from your voice. So keep talking.
Thank you.
And if you ever feel like no one is listening, keep talking.
Thank you.
Someone is always listening, whether you see them or not. So stay true to who God has called you to be. Don't try and fit anybody else's mold. And I want to say, for all of our listeners, thank you so much. This conversation has flown by, but we're going to continue. Next week, womanhood. We're having another conversation about women in entrepreneurship. We'll see you next week. Same place, same time, on the flip side. Thanks, Jordan. I cannot believe how fast.
Oh my gosh.
You too.
Speak to everybody.
Hey, Facebook, I'm going to tell y'all what. I am not kidding. This conversation
It flew.
flew by. I feel like somebody punked us, like messed with the clock. We were just getting into it.
I was like, I need to say something. Yeah, that's so funny. This was so good, though.
So you know what? I was on a podcast, actually, what's today? Thursday, yesterday. And it's called The Black Entrepreneur. It's going to be coming out in a couple of months. And she asked me, what would you say to your younger self? And you hear that all the time.
Yeah.
I actually want to ask you, what do you want to say to your older self?
Look right here.
Right there. Thank you. To my older self, I would want to say that I hope that she's successful, but not in a way that feels fleeting or temporary. That I hope that she is fulfilled and doing what she loves, and not feeling like she has to race to the next task every single day, but that she's living presently and for her identity in God.
Yes, indeed. wise beyond her years. Y'all heard it? Y'all heard it? And give her some hearts. I mean, come on, give her some hearts.
I think
She
this
put
is
it
your dad.
down.
That's your dad.
Tony.
It's probably both of them.
So that's Mom. She is amazing. We do love her. And Dad said I would try to describe how proud I am, but she speaks for herself. She does. She does. She sure does.
That's enough.
Look.
That's good parenting right there.
He said, look.
Yes.
Hey guys. Hey.
I love everything about look, they talking, I can't believe how big she is. Yep, she all grown up.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, it's all on Facebook.
They got the old family friends. on
Everybody. So we always have one question that we only share on Facebook. So I guess this one, how important is the intersectionality when it comes to understanding and addressing challenges that are facing
Mhm.
womanhood in our different generations?
Yeah. It's so important. It's absolutely vital, I think. I think we need to have women of all ages, people of all ages working in the same fields, communicating on the same ideas or different ideas, communicating on how we think society should look like, and in church as well, women of different ages talking about what church should look like and how we should come together and worship. So I feel like without that, and you have only one generation's perspective, doesn't matter what generation it is, if you only have one generation, your things are going to stay the same and things aren't going to improve and grow. And you'll never know what it might have been like to have the perspective of someone who doesn't see things exactly the way you do.
Well, what I hear you talking about is actually continuing to allow innovation to reside in the space.
Yes.
So you can't have innovation without diverse voices all around the table, and not just voices there, but voices actually having and being empowered to make a difference, to shift decisions, and to impact change.
Mhm.
And I think when you talk about our opportunity, especially as those who are people of faith in the church, and recognizing my generation was one in which we had a very traditional, it was not until my 40s, I feel like I actually had an authentic relationship with Christ. It was very traditional. It was how many ministries you were on. It was church from sun up to sundown.
Mhm.
And if you didn't go to all of the services, your salvation was in question. It was a religious
Mm.
experience. And it actually wasn't until my 40s when I intentionally stepped out of an environment that was like truly
Yeah.
that I really pursued relationship. What would you say your generation is looking for in church?
I think, first of all, unfortunately, a lot of my generation doesn't go to church because they're of the perspective that everything is, I'm spiritual, not religious, and you have to have a relationship with God. It's not a religion. And to an extent, I totally believe that relationship is absolutely important and it's about your individual connection with God. But I also think that church is so important, and that discipline of church and accountability of church. Oh my gosh, if you are just talking to God every single day by yourself, of course he can speak to you, but you're just going to stay the same. Yeah.
It goes through your filter.
So I think getting my generation excited about going to church again and helping them to genuinely find community there of other people their age, other artistic people. Oh my gosh, I feel like Christians are the most creative, and nobody knows that because their talents aren't portrayed, and they should be portrayed in the church. So I love that we're getting to a place where tech media is getting a spotlight on them with like PowerPoints and stuff, and worship arts and all of that. Is there's a place for that in Christian spaces and in the church. I think continuing to do that will make a big difference.
Yeah. Creating space for that creative outlet, and recognizing there isn't just one way of worship. It can look really diverse.
Mm-hmm.
And my generation being patient with how the music might be different, the attire might be different, the way that the artistic expression is done, me being patient and understanding and open
Mm-hmm.
to the fact that we actually serve a creative God
Mm-hmm.
who created creation and
Yes.
creativity. So it originated with him. So therefore, why should we be the ones that try to stifle it?
True.
But what I truly agree with you is the accountability and relationship that I'm worried your generation is missing out on,
Mm-hmm.
because so much is digital and so much is technology and so much is Zoom and so much is in a device.
Yeah.
And you have such quick access to so many perspectives
Yeah.
from your bedroom or your living room, that we're losing sight that all human beings need connection
Yeah. That's so good.
and
Yeah. Real quick,
accountability.
I just want to jump back on something that you said about you feel like it's important to adapt to new ways of worship in the church. And I just wanted to clarify that I'm not I think there is a big push and an advocating for like every single church to look like a concert and to have smoke machines and to be super big and loud.
No.
I just think that different types of churches should be allowed to exist in the same area.
Yes.
Different denominations, of course, and different ways of worship, I think, are so beautiful. Like, I think some people genuinely do love the loud and colorful worship, and some people really find peace in more traditional worship. And I think both ways are so beautiful, and you should choose however makes you feel connected to God. And my choir director once said, this quote will like stick with me forever. He said, "I wonder what God hears on a Sunday morning when he hears all the churches worshiping him from different places in different tongues." I just think it's beautiful to picture that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is beautiful.
I know.
But you just brought us full circle back to your opening conversation. It's about releasing our assumptions.
Yes.
And really just coming together to see one another and have relationship.
Yep.
I'm so glad we're in relationship. Facebook community, thank you again. Thank you again. Please make sure you like and share this conversation. We absolutely want others to be able to see that different generations can sit at the table and have a powerful, honest conversation from different lenses. So again, we'll see you next week, same time, same place, on the flip side. Bye.